Hello, hello. Feels like it's been a while to me. Probably feels more so like it's been a while for you guys, considering that I don't think that I've uploaded anything in quite a while, actually. It's an unusual feeling, especially considering I've been working on that damn animation for so long. It's almost done. It is almost done, but I figured, well, my retention probably sucks a big monkey dong right now, so I better upload something. So to that effect, I decided, why not Star Wars? Why not? There's a little bit more thought to it went into it than that. It's not because Star Wars is hot right now or anything like that. Something I almost never mention is that I kind of I'm not a Star Wars fan in most respects. It's more a matter of I like watching Star Wars things. I like to read about them sometimes, to go wiki diving. But I'm in that weird place where I would never say, yeah, oh yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan. No, not really. Like, I'm even aware of a lot of weird EU and comic shit sometimes. It kind of just depends. But I would never describe myself as being a fan. And I might talk a little bit about that, but first off, I'll just go ahead and stipulate what exactly it is that I'm doing. I was sitting around thinking, what should I draw? What should I draw? And of course, common thoughts went through my head of, what if I drew a furry woman of some sort? Ha 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 ha. Don't push me close to the edge. But I decided against that. Because I figured, well, I'll have plenty of time to do that later. So for the time being, I want to do something a little bit different. And I just so happened that I've been thinking about some sort of Star Wars something or other lately, for some reason. And I just had the whim of, you know what? I think I'll draw something related to that. And I've already drawn Hera, who's probably... I really like Hera. She's the green Twi'lek girl from Rebels. I really like her. Like, that's... fictional characters, but that's my type. Like, if it's an actual woman, that's my type. Because I really like the, strong, determined, kind of snarky, but still very polite, very caring... very intelligent. Like, I just like that overall. She's a great character. I really like it whenever she breaks into that French accent, too. Magnifique on that one. Alright, but I've already drawn her. So, obviously, the next logical step is, well, I've already sexualized one character. I actually didn't sexualize her. I just drew her. So my next thought was, obviously, it's gotta be Maul, right? No? That train of thought doesn't follow with you? Oh, well. But anyways... The whole point for with drawing Maul is I was kind of thinking to myself, what would be a good way to sort of encapsulate the idea of what the video would be, because it's obviously going to be mainly be just discussing the entire concept of Star Wars. And I thought, you know what, a good example of that would probably be my relationship with Darth Maul. That'll give me a good stepping off point, so that's where that came from. That was the impetus. And my relationship with Darth Maul is, whenever the original Phantom Menace came out, of course at the time, I was born in 82, so whenever that came out, I can't remember when it came out. I really can't remember what year that actually came out. But, obviously, I'm going to look it up right now, actually. Phantom Menace came out in 55% Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, it was 99, okay. 1999. So whenever that came out, I was almost out of high school, not quite there just yet. So, I don't have... A lot of people on the internet have a nostalgic remembrance of the secondary trilogy. I was not around for the first trilogy whenever it came out, so I wasn't part of that crowd. I was a little bit too old to have any sort of formative relationship with the secondary trilogy, so I didn't get that relationship either. So I consider myself to be a little bit more balanced in my approach. I think that the second trilogy has its merits. I think that has obviously many, many problems, but I don't say that they're absolute garbage dog poo-poo like a lot of people will either. Phantom Menace, though, Phantom Menace is a pretty bad film. And Darth Maul is a good indication of what was going wrong in regards to that. Because Maul himself, like, whenever the original film came out, there's no Rebels, there's no Clone Wars, there's certainly no novel tie-ins, there's nothing. It's just the movie. And Maul was just a nothing character. That was my opinion of him, and it still is for the most part, in regards to that movie. But he's just a nothing character. He just exists to sell toys. Ray did a fine job whenever he played him, but he just exists. He has almost no characterization. There's no real explanation for why he's there, what he's doing, why we will last. Like, he barely has any lines in the film in the first place. At last, we will get our revenge against the Jedi. What's your revenge? Like, there's no context for anything in regards to Maul, and that changed a lot over the years, because I will say that usually the worst part about Star Wars are usually the films. And this is kind of a weird thing to say, because I'm not a big expanded universe person or anything like that. But I can at least appreciate the huge amount of effort and expertise that a lot of people have gone through, put out, to be able to rationalize and fix things that were fucked up in the original movies, and expand on characters and elaborate on things in a very clever way. So, the EU and the comics and whatever else is related to that, even some of the newer film stuff, which we'll get to that as well, exhibit a lot of creativity, and obviously there's been a lot of effort put into trying to do honor to the feelings that they might get from watching the films in the first place. The actual realization of what the universe can be isn't really in most of the films. It's mainly in that expanded universe, or inside of the things that the fans have created. So, Maul, to me, exhibits a lot of that. Because Maul's just an action figure, whenever he was introduced. He was nothing. He was not a character. A lot of people, like, I always got kind of upset with Maul's my favorite character. Why? He's nothing. He is literally nothing. And that remained true for a very, very long time. And it isn't until somewhat recently, whenever he's been given more of a time to shine in his own right. And I really feel like most of Maul's story, because if you don't know what I'm talking about, the best way of catching up on that is to watch Clone Wars and Rebels, the two CG little cartoons that have come out. Those two do a lot better job on elaborating on who he is, but still the thing about him is that even with those series, most of what he is tied into his failings. Like it's tied in not to how he became a Sith or anything like that, or why he is a Sith. It orients mostly around his desire for vengeance after losing to Obi-Wan. And that's pretty much most of what he is. Obi-Wan jumping up and cleaving him in half, etc. That's just sort of the starting point for most of what the expanded material goes into. And I'm not going to go down a laundry list of what all happens to him and everything else. But the point is that by the time that you actually get to the end of his little saga in Rebels, he has way, way more characterization, which is pretty easy considering he had basically none in his original introduction. But you really get an understanding that Maul, at the point that he ends in Rebels, is a completely defeated person that is still sort of married to the ideals of the Sith because that's all he's ever known. But you can tell that he wants someone to end him. Like, he just wants to die. Like, he's looking for revenge, and he's being driven by all these emotions because that's what's keeping him together. But really, he's looking for Obi-Wan, not necessarily out of the ideals of Sith vengeance. He just wants to be ended. Because he's just inwardly such a broken, shamble of a person at this point. After, coming back from his injuries, after losing his brother, after losing his mother, which that's more of a comic thing. Clone Wars before the Disney buyout was going to end a little bit differently. And that did come out in the comics, I believe, where his mother was the literal, I can't remember what her name is, her title is, but the witch, the mother of the planet that he came from, which is not the homeworld of the Zabraks, I think his species are called. It's the homeworld of the offshoot subspecies that he's a part of. You can tell whenever I say that I don't really know that much about Star Wars, I know some things, but not everything. You can kind of get the impression of how much I know, because I'm not a Star Wars nerd, but I sort of know things that I probably shouldn't know, because it's just sort of it's peripheral stuff that you just sort of pick up on if you hang around people like that a bit. So I really appreciate Maul's character and the way that he developed in that respect. You get way more of an idea of him being an actual person from those two series. More so, actually, Rebels. Rebels, I would say, is an inferior series to Clone Wars, especially Season 1. Season 1 is just a train wreck. Like, Season 1 is just... We're post-Disney, we're very safe, we don't want to take any risks, this is for kids, let's not get in trouble, and everything is aiming towards a demographic that is way too low. And the writing is just very stupid and kind of harebrained and direct. It had really no value at all. It had very little substance as far as a narrative goes. And it did sort of work itself out. But Maul has more of a characterization, more development within Rebels, actually. Because in Rebels, he becomes, in a way, a lot creepier. Because in Clone Wars, he's more just, oh, I'm crazy, spider legs, man, yeah, look at me. He's not actually like that. But by the time he actually sorts himself out, he's still kind of, he still seems to me almost sort of still a generic villain at that point. He still is just sort of that way. He still hasn't really been worked out to be someone yet. Because I feel like a lot of the Sith, the villains in Star Wars, have that problem. Because they're just such cliche, I want to rule the universe for no real reason villains. They don't really have much of a personality beyond just, I want power. I love being power. Oh, power for me. And that's all they are. And Maul's he's still sort of stuck that way in Clone Wars. And it isn't until you actually get the Rebels where you actually get more of an impression of why he is the way that he is, and what's driving him, and how he's going to end. So, all that said, if you want to know more about that, just go watch the series. Clone Wars is a fantastic series. Clone Wars is a fantastic series mainly because it aims more... Anytime it involves the actual clone troopers, it's fantastic. Like, a lot of the later episodes especially are absolutely amazing for that reason. Because it's approaching it more from, like, a human perspective, and the idea of what the clones are, that they are still people. They're still individuals, and they're programmed, and they're driven for this need for conflict, but at the same time, they still have human behaviors inside of them. Like, that's really interesting. And they actually do go into that quite a few times. So anything actually involving the clone troopers is fantastic. And there's a lot of peripheral sort of stuff involving the actual Jedi and so forth and so on. That is interesting as well. I wouldn't say is usually not as strong as the clone troopers stuff, though. And by the time that you get to Rebels, it starts to orient itself too much towards the main cast and Nezri, and it gets a little bit too obsessive with them. I don't really care for that as much. It's a weaker series overall, I think, but it still has its own merits, and by the time you get past Season 1, Season 2 definitely, by the time you get past Season 1, it kind of works itself out a little bit. By the time that you're through with Season 2, you can tell that it's kind of gotten back to the quality that it left its sister series with. So, yeah, Maul. That's why I picked Maul, is because Maul sort of, in a way, kind of signifies what I think of whenever I think of Star Wars in the first place. Because Star Wars is just it's such a series that it doesn't really deserve its own love in a lot of cases. Because, like, think about it. First Star Wars film is, it's not like this amazing film. At the time it was, and a lot of films are like this. That they were amazing for the time that they were created in. And that's absolutely 100% fine. I make that argument for a lot of things. There are a lot of films, like I love the original War of the Worlds, the 1950s one, because it was amazing for the time. And I love those ship designs, the floating green. Oh, I fucking love those things. Those are awesome. And it was amazing for the time. But if you watch it now, you're like, what is this? Like, it doesn't really hold up. Star Wars, the first film, does not really have that problem exactly. It was just amazing technically at the time. Like, as far as technical presentation, it was fantastic. But as far as its story goes, it doesn't really have that particularly amazing of a story. It was just an evolution of the old serials, and that's all it was, and that's all it really needed to be. So in hindsight, looking back on the original Star Wars film, it's not like it's that amazing of a film if you were to watch it today. It's still fun. It's still a fun film, but it's not like it's anything particularly outstanding in that respect. Second film, I would say the second film is, absolutely fantastic. Empire is absolutely fantastic. Nothing really too negative to say about that, other than Vader being extremely tiny in that one scene. That is true. And third film, not so great. First half, fantastic. Second half of the third film really starts to fall apart. So, original series, one pretty good film that was excellent for the time that it was made, maybe not so much now, still pretty good. Second film, amazing. Third film, yeah. It has its own relationship. Ewoks, etc. And then you get into the other trilogy, the 90s trilogy, 2000s. And obviously the first film, absolutely terrible. Like, there's almost no redeeming qualities, in my opinion. It's just not a particularly good film. You really have to be married to Star Wars to try to defend it, anyway. I'm sure if you go hunting, especially if you start bringing in materials that were made around the film, like books or anything like that, then you could definitely say, well, it has merits now. But as far as just the film standalone, especially at the time that it was made, not good at all. Just not good at all. Second film, obviously very problematic. It's not a particularly good film on its own either. Third film's okay. Yeah, I'd probably put it kind of the same realm that a Jedi is. Jedi, not particularly amazing, has its own problems. I feel that film's kind of the same way. Like, I'm not going to rank them by order of tens or anything like that. But Star Wars, like, as a whole, as far as the films go, it's not like they have a particularly good track record whenever you actually look at them. Because not too many of the films, like, in total, are very good. Most of the love of Star Wars comes from the idea of Star Wars and the things that people project onto it. And especially the expanded universe and the other media that forms around it. All the stuff that people make for Star Wars is usually amazing. Like the video games as well. A lot of fantastic video games came out during the late 90s, mid-90s as well. 2000s as well. Like going up until Knights. Like a lot of good stuff has come out of Star Wars that was not Star Wars itself, not the films themselves. So, again, Maul. This is why I chose Maul, for this reason. Now, as far as the new films go, this is the other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about. The new films, the way that people have been reacting to them is really interesting to me. And again, I wouldn't consider myself to be a Star Wars fan, and some people might say, oh, I can tell, and some other people might say, are you kidding? You obviously are. But to me, I'm not. I do find it interesting, though. So in regards to that, a lot of people have been complaining endlessly about these new Star Wars films. And it's one of those things, it's a very modern problem. Like, anytime that it comes up, it reminds me a lot of the way that people debate modern concepts of, like, political, like transgender things and stuff like that. It reminds me a lot of that, as far as how binary people get and how upset about Team A versus Team B. You're one of them or you're one of us, that sort of attitude. Star Wars fans really get that way too, in a lot of ways, in regards to either you're with us or you're against us. If you like the new films, then you're a trash human being. If you despise them in every way, then you have to absolutely hate them. And you have to be calling for, what's her name? The lady that everyone hates. I can't remember what her name is. I'll look for her real fast. Here's a good way to find it. Star Wars Firehead of... I thought for sure... No, there's a lot of Fire Ryan Johnsons and stuff like that, but... I think her name is Kennedy. I think that's what it is. I can't remember. But anytime that I see her name... I was actually thinking about her a few hours ago, and I could remember what her name was then. But you get the idea. Anytime that I see someone bring her up specifically, I can almost always know, oh, it's one of the people that hate new Star Wars and are calling for people's heads, because those are the only people that ever bring her up, is whenever they have some sort of weird political agenda against it. And to me, whenever you kind of... It just... That's the perception that I have of it. It's just a very weird sort of a problem that's going on with the new films. Because... This is my ulterior motive whenever I decided on this. Because I kind of specifically wanted to talk about this because it has a relationship in regards to making things that are merchandised and, making your own setting and things like that, and fan reactions to it. Because with the new Star Wars stuff, I see a lot of people say I hate the new direction, things need to change, but whenever I actually... look for this came to mind because I was trying to find information on some new stuff. I forget what it was. I just had some offhand thought of, I'll look for this today, and I couldn't find any information on it because all the search results were just get this woman and out of her position, fire everyone involved, get rid of the canonicity of all the new films, make Solo uncanon, make The Force Awakens not canon anymore. It's just that, over and over and over again. And there's so much whining that it's really difficult to find any actual information. That's what sort of provoked this. So, whenever I look for, okay, what do, these kinds of people, the people that are really angry, and usually, I'm getting into this because usually the people that are very angry don't know what they want. And more than that, usually my perception is that people that get angry about that they would just want gratification. They want fan gratification. They want to see their toys fight. It has a very similar relationship with sort of like Dragon Ball. A lot of people complain about the story direction of Dragon Ball, and you'll wait and see, okay, what do you actually want? And a lot of it comes down to, well, I want so-and-so's power to combine with this power, and for him to use this, and to bring back this power up, and they don't say anything about the actual narration or the story or the characters. They just want to see their toys fight. They want to see cool shit. And I get that, I get that a lot from Star Wars. Because whenever I'm looking for people to say, okay, what do you want? What do you actually want? What are the changes you actually want to see? Most of the time, they don't have any ideas. I really tire of that reaction, that specific reaction of... I hate this. I want it to change. They could do so much better. And then stopping them and go, okay, what do you want though? And they just rename all the things that they already saw from the thing that they supposedly hate. They just rehash the whole plot of the thing they just saw. But then they amend it with, yeah, that, but better. That's the solution. And they do that because they don't have any ideas. They don't know how to criticize. They haven't really evaluated in their head what it is exactly about it that has offended them. So the only way they can sort of get rid of that thought in their head is to just say, okay, this, but just do it again so I like it. And that doesn't solve any problems. So whenever I see people doing that in regards to the new films, they either do that, or they just say, well, fire this person, fire this person, fire this person. And they don't actually say what changes they actually want to see are. And anytime I've done this before, is whenever I'm working and I'm listening to videos, I'll just go through a bunch of videos, and I'll look at the comment section for one of these sorts of videos of changes need to happen in Star Wars. Here's what they should be. And it's just another fire so-and-so video, I hate these films video. And I'll scroll down to the comments, and no one gives any actual suggestions on this character should have done this. Instead of this character not having important parents, they should be this character. Like, you never really see that. It's just people just complaining. Just moaning their emotions out on paper, or on screen, as it were. And that's all it is. And that's kind of disappointing to me. I can sort of see why people don't like the new films, and to me, I'm certainly not married to them. For the most part, I'm actually kind of pleased with them. There are elements of them that I really like getting away from just Sith versus Jedi, Sith versus Jedi, Sith versus Jedi. Just doing that over and over and over again, and moving more towards this. It's more about the gray area in between, which I know a lot of people, that also makes a lot of people angry, the idea that there's gray at all. A lot of people would say, well, there's not gray, there's a balance that hasn't been approached yet, and that's more the point. It's actually integrating both light and dark into your life at the same time. Like, all those ideas, I like those ideas. Like, I want to explore more of that. I think that's really interesting, and the new films are trying to do that, and Rebels was trying to do that as well. The Bendu and so forth and so on. Now, there's also, like, peripheral, like, political elements that people get angry about. The whole, like, SJW stuff, and, like, the robot, and Rey being overpowered, and so forth and so on. Which, representation is good. Modern cinema does have this problem, because if you know me, I really like strong women, but at the same time, I like it whenever they're actually represented correctly. I've complained about this, too. I think I refer to it as, like, Black Widow syndrome, where we want a strong female character, but the idea of a strong female character is just dressing someone up in spandex, and having a female character that has no personality at all just kick the shit out of everyone. And having that be a literal strong character. And that's not how you do it. Because you end up with a sort of Black Widow problem. Of a character that is just there. They're beating the shit out of everyone, but they don't have a personality. They're just sort of nothing. And that's a problem. That's not how you do a strong represented character or whatever. And you also don't want to shove people into a story whenever it doesn't have anything to do with the story. Whenever you're writing anything, your direction should be towards whatever the tone and the theme and the message of the film is. It shouldn't be, just a story that has a bunch of your personal politics riding along, waving from, like, the car that you're driving, and shouting out, everyone should be accepting of gay people, or whatever it is. If someone, I've always loved, like, Dumbledore, for example. Like, Dumbledore's gay, right? But is that important to the plot at all? No, it doesn't matter. Does the plot ever even mention, oh, he's gay? No, of course not. It has nothing to do with Harry Potter. Why would it? So, to me, that's how you do things like that. They're just there. They just exist. And that's absolutely fine. You don't want to have everything turn into your political platform, in other words. So that becomes, like, I understand that people have a problem with it as well. But things like, getting to the end here, but things like, how can they drop bombs in space? They can drop bombs in space because they were in orbit around a planet, and whenever you're in orbit around a planet, you don't have anti-gravity, you're falling at a set rate, so it makes perfect sense that things would fall. Or, how can a ship catch up with another ship that ran out of fuel? It's because they're in space, there's no resistance, and they're in a constant state of acceleration, so whenever one ship stops utilizing fuel, they keep moving at a set pace, and the other one that keeps using fuel behind them, because they haven't run out, keeps accelerating, so they gain ground even though the other one isn't losing any. Does that make sense? Like, things like that. People nitpick things like that, but they don't understand what it is they're even saying. There's just a lot of mindless nitpicking and completely pointless complaining that doesn't seem to really have any basis at all. The thing that people really seem to be more complaining about is the overall tone and direction, and things like, I don't like the way that Luke was handled because my idea of Luke is that he should be like a Superman character that is all powerful, has no flaws, and is there to fix every problem, and he can make black holes with his mind, and should realize all the fantasies that I've had of him since reading the EU material back in the late 90s, or something like that. Like, it's very difficult to actually approach that section of the fandom, because it's so toxic. But on the other hand, all the sort of other Team A or Team B, whatever you want to look at it, like all the sort of mindless fanboyism and no, everything's perfect, everyone's doing like that also is wrong. The don't criticize anyone thing, that's also wrong. So, like with many things, I'm somewhere in the middle. And this way, the politics too. Anytime I take one of those little tests where it shows you the grid, I'm usually like almost always in the center. And people don't like it whenever you're in the center in regards to anything. So, in regards to Star Wars, if I say something like, I'm okay with the films, they could use some work, you'll get the Team A people that complain about you being a toxic, like, woman hater or something like that. Then you'll have the other side that say, oh, you're the problem, you're an SJW, whatever it is. And you get stuck in between the Team A and the Team B nonsense. When it's Star Wars, it's just a dumb story about a little green man in a force that teaches some kid to move things with his head. And that's all it's ever been. Like I said, I'm not a Star Wars fan. I kind of enjoy aspects of it, so whenever I go looking for things of, I'd like to enjoy this today, and all I see are these weird, like to me it's really bizarre, these political engagements people have over absolutely nothing. It's kind of amazing. It really amazes me. It also kind of disappoints me too, but it's also kind of fascinating. And it's disappointing that the general direction of the films is something that I'm more or less okay with, but just the visceral hatred that it has been eliciting that no one can really explain. Like, there's no smoking gun for it. It's just a weird emotional state that people have worked themselves into, has created so much resistance that, like, Solo suffered. Solo, apparently, I haven't seen it myself. Solo apparently is a pretty good film. Not fantastic, but it's apparently a pretty good film that did very poorly in the box office. Partially because of franchise fatigue, but also because people have been, like, boycotting it. Don't go see this movie because we want to we want to ruin the financial state of Disney's involvement with the films so that they will be forced into doing what we want them to do. And whenever they make their demands on what they want to do, they don't have anything specific in mind. They just want people fired. And to me, that's like as a creator, that's the thing that always kind of annoys me, is whenever you don't have any action. Like, it's the same thing like science or something. Like, if you have a problem within a scientific field, you just don't start screaming, fire so-and-so. You look at what the problem is, you analyze it, you figure out what the solution could be, and suggest, we need to look at it from this perspective now. Create your control, do this set of experiments, and then we might be able to narrow down what the issues are. Because we can see these issues. But people just react with emotion in regards to anything art-related, so you never really get that. So, to me, I would say that the problems with the more modern films are that they do try to wedge too much politics in there sometimes, I would say. But that's not really the point. The actual problem I really have with the new films is that a lot of the characters don't have much characterization. And I don't even mean that from, like, a toy perspective. Like, Phasma, for example, is a good example of that. Everyone thought, oh, she's going to be awesome. She's going to be this great character. And supposedly in her book she is. But from what I gather from the book, is that she's just an ass kicker that doesn't really have much of a personality. She's just... She what I was talking about before, she has the Black Widow, whatever the hell I said, problem of, I'm a ass-kicking badass woman that doesn't really have much going for her beyond that, is the impression that I got. And it's just a book of her being a badass. There might be more to it than that, but whenever people explain it, and this is more the point, when people actually explain it in videos, or to me, that's what they focus on, is she's a badass. But even ignoring that, like, just forget the books for a second. within the context of the films, whenever they present characters like this, whether it's Rose, whether it's Finn, or whatever, they just sort of exist. And they don't really focus too much on who they are as people, why they are the way that they are, their interactions with one another in that regard. They're loose characters they're sort of defined but not really well defined, and they're being used in the film to do things that are kind of mundane. Like, I don't even have to go into the whole casino scene, because the fact that it was like an extended 20 minutes extra worth of footage is amazing to me. I don't know what they were thinking in regards to that. But there are so many characters that just sort of exist. Like, Rey is a great example. Like, all the dumb Mary Sue stuff aside, she doesn't have that much of a personality. She sort of does, and I can sort of tell that there's elements of who she is there, but that's more the problem. They don't really go into it. They don't really focus enough on them, like what they are. They're placing too many things in these films that they plan on elaborating more in peripheral materials. Like, they're merchandising their story too much. Like the Phasma thing. Oh, we'll take care of that in a book that's coming up. Or, a character will show up like the guy in the latest film, I can't remember what his name is, but the sort of Han Solo guy, the bounty hunter sort of fellow that they meet in the jail. I can't remember what the hell his name was. But a lot of fans got upset because they wanted him to be a Han Solo character. They wanted him to have some cliche turn of heart where he saves them at the very end and they go off together and he becomes a good guy. To me, that would have been terrible, because it's just trying to wedge everything into a cliche, and to me that has absolutely no value at all. I like the fact that he betrayed them, because it shows this is what the universe is. Like, not everyone is going to, fit into this mold of what you want them to be, and that's absolutely fine. But I sort of get the impression that he's one of those characters that there will be a book about in the future or something. And they don't really go into him because he's not that important. There will be a book, or, a series will delve more into it later on. And a lot of characters are getting sort of that Maul treatment of they exist, they don't really do anything, there's not much there in regards to why they are the way that they are. They behave in sort of sometimes strange ways, but we'll explain it later in some other media. That's the problem I have with the new films, for the most part. The general direction of where they're going in regards to focusing more on balance. Like, another great example would be Snoke. A lot of people complain about Snoke, kind of just being dismissed, and I agree with that. But the idea that the problem that they're engaged with right now in the new films and this part of the setting, this part of the timeline, is that there are remnants that want the universe to stay the way that it was. Like, there need to be Jedi and there need to be Sith. We need to keep things exactly the way they are. But the new people are like, well, no, we need to have actual balance or whatever. And Snoke and people like that encompass that a lot, because Snoke, projects himself as this giant hologram. He's trying to be bigger than life, but in reality, he's a nobody. Like, he's nothing. He's nowhere near as strong as Sidious was. He's nowhere near as strong as what Vader was. He's just a remnant. Like, he's just like the First Order. They're just a pathetic remnant that just sort of exist, and that's all they are. And it's a sign that part of the way that the universe works in that setting is slowly dying off. And Snoke, being a nobody that was pumping himself up to be something great, but ended up being absolutely nothing, that's absolutely fine. But it was not communicated in the film. And that, again, is the problem. It wasn't communicated. Because there was no even dialogue. There sort of was in regards to Kylo Ren saying, kill the past, that sort of thing, which a lot of people also got angry about for ludicrous reasons. But there was no dialogue suggesting Snoke was never as great as you think that he was. Like, Luke would be a good character to say this. If Luke said, Snoke was a nobody. Like, he's really just nothing. I just never bothered to get rid of him. Or, he's nothing compared to what Sidious was. He's just a vestige of the old, the way that things used to work that you need to get rid of. Just focusing the story that way and making it clear that the reason why Snoke was just, dusted off of the page is because there was a reason for it, and there's a narrative reason for it. And the movies just don't do that. That's my problem with the new movies. It's just that their narrative focus is not clear. The direction that they're wanting to take things is not clear. The way that they're trying to handle characters is not clear. It is just not really going the places that it should be going. That's my issue with it. And the original films didn't really have that problem exactly. First film was one thing. Second film had really good characterization. Like, the characters were very strong in that, not because of the things that they were doing, but because of the performances and the deliveries of the actors. Third film was the third film, whatever. So to me, the success of the first trilogy was its ability to be fun, most importantly. To be not even, like, a lot of people have focused, like, I saw one video recently of a guy saying, this is what you need to do. You need to make sure that there are more badass moments, like Yoda fighting Sidious or something like that. And I was sitting here thinking, no, that's the exact opposite of what you need. Because that's the toy mentality. That's the dumbass fan mentality that everything needs to be you with your action figures smashing the plastic together going, now I will defeat you with my new superpower that I learned. Like, that's not what Star Wars is, nor what Star Wars should be. That's not what any story should be. It should never be about power sets and characters getting into big fights with each other and, like, badass dark moments. It has to be so dark. No, don't do that. It should always be foremost about loving the characters, having fun with the characters, going through the conflicts and desires of those main characters in a way that makes you care about the outcome, but also fear the potential outcomes that it can create. To me, that's the strength of any good story. And the new films aren't really doing that because the new films have trouble making you care about the characters because things kind of just happen. Like, Rose is a good example. Her, like, kissing Finn just comes out of nowhere. There's no real build up to it. And if you read into it, and this is the important part, if you really read into it, you can sort of sit there and think, okay, well, she probably sees this in him, and she probably needs this thing in her life, and that's what's going on. But that requires you to sit down and actually start thinking about it. Which can be good, but and you don't want your movie to spell it out either. You don't want a character to, like, look at the camera and go, well, she was feeling this, and, like, you don't want that either. Like, there has to be a balance there, and to me the balance is leaning more towards, we'll explain it later. Whereas the balance in the original films was it leaned more heavily on, we don't need to explain everything because everything is just about having an adventure with these characters. Like, it's very straightforward in that regard. And too many people are focusing too much on the toy aspects and the greater bloat of what Star Wars has become over the past few decades. Because even the original films, even the way that the Force worked was very different in regards to, like, my perception of it. With original films, it felt almost more like it was a personality-related thing, in which you can see beyond what reality is, and you can tap into the Force if you're the kind of person that can actually look at the universe that way. I never saw it as being like a genetic predisposition, but apparently it is, according to Lucas. And even in regards to what the Force powers do, I thought, well, the Force can just do anything. Like, it's a limitless thing. There's not like a video game power set that you go down your skill tree and look at that way. Jedi dressed in robes because they were in the desert at the time, and that's what everyone wore. Sure, they might use lightsabers sometimes, but Sidious didn't use a lightsaber because it was a Jedi weapon. And Vader had one because he was a Jedi that had fallen. So he now has a red saber because that's what he was used to. Sidious never was a Jedi, so therefore he never used a lightsaber. But the way that Star Wars has developed over the past few decades has become more of a video game in which the Force cannot do anything. The Force is relegated more to, if you're evil, you work your way up to Force lightning. If you're good, then you mainly use Force push, and sometimes you might go really fast or jump really high or something like that. it's a video game. It became less about the narrative potential of what the Force can do and what the Force is in that regard, as being the Force in life, and has become more about just the toy aspect of it, what you can market the setting as doing in regards to its mechanical ability. And I don't much care for that. So in that respect, I really liked the new films because things like Luke did all sorts of weird things that I never really thought about, like him being able to project himself and not really being there. A lot of people hated that. He should be there. He should fight him because I want to see a big fight. Oh, it drives me crazy. The fact that he wasn't there, and he wasn't, he wanted to stop the legacy of what he was and what the Sith and the Jedi have been doing and allow the universe to expand into what it wanted to be. That was sort of the whole point of that film. And a lot of hardcore fans took the point of the film to be more just Disney flipping them off and saying, go fuck yourselves. This is what Star Wars is now. It's such an aggressive interpretation. But the actual tone and direction of that film was that they were just saying the era of just Jedi versus Jedi. Did I say Jedi? Jedi versus Sith is not really going anywhere, because that's the whole point. It hasn't been going anywhere ever since, forever. Ever since the supposed origination of the Jedi philosophy on what's the name of the planet? It's almost Jedi. It's like Jedi or something silly. But supposedly there were all sorts of different religions on that planet, and the Jedi were just one of a subset of many, many ways of looking at the Force at the time. But anyways, it hasn't evolved ever since then. It just has been eating itself. So the whole point is, let's come up with something different. There might still be Sith and Jedi around in a sense of people trying to reclaim the past, but let's open things up and actually explore more elements of what the Force can be. Let's do that. Let's explore more of the gray area in between. And I like that. That was the point of the film, and whenever Luke actually goes there, but he isn't there in physical body, his physical body isn't there, to me, that's a really good ending sequence, because he's interfering, but he's not physically interfering. He's not fixing the problem for them. He's just giving them the time that they need in order to fix the problem themselves. And the same goes for Ben. He's not going to tell, Ben even, are you here at the rescue? It's to save my soul. And Luke says, no, he's not there to do that. And to me, that's a good idea for him to show up without actually physically being there. It's a good way of encapsulating what the whole point of the film was supposed to be. To me, the latest film had some problems. For the most part, it was pretty well written. It may have some direction problems. It may have some problems in regards to establishing what the characters need to actually be. Maybe some elements of Luke and how he became a little too depressed, a little too selfish in that regard. That also probably is not where it should have been. But it's nowhere near being this flaming trash heap that people describe it as being. So, going back to Maul here. Maul, this is Star Wars to me. Maul is Star Wars. He begins as some dumb toy that has absolutely no depth, and then he gets more development, and a lot of people start to really like him. And a lot of people loved him back whenever the original movie was released. Who's your favorite character? It's Maul. I love Maul from The Phantom Menace. People actually said this before all the new stuff came out. And you're present, why do you like him? Oh, he's just badass. He's just a badass. He has no lines. He's not a person. But that has evolved, and now he actually is. And now there's a rationale for why he might actually be your favorite character. Because he actually does have quite a bit of dimension to him. And that's great. And then he might evolve even further, because supposedly he's going to be in the new films, and he could be ruined. He very well could be. And he could get to the point where people that are now married to what he is right now might see that how he's being used in the new films is something that they absolutely detest, because it's not what they thought he should have been in the first place. And that can end up making people despise the originals, because people get too married, too intertwined with their feelings concerning that universe, or concerning any universe, because this is just the nature of how writing, of marketing, of consumer like projection of themselves onto the product. Like, this is how all these things sort of work together. And it's a problem that I would not envy Disney or Rian Johnson or anyone else or whatever of ever having to deal with, because it's a very complicated problem. And whenever people do what they're doing now and organize themselves in a coordinated hatred of something that doesn't have much of a basis other than gut, visceral, emotional reaction to something. Like, it doesn't really have much place in regards to logic or actually analysis. It's just reactionary. Whenever that happens, it becomes almost mimetic in the sense that people feed into it, and it becomes the culture surrounding your own product. So now, people actually reacting positively doesn't matter. Like Solo, in the case of Solo. Apparently a good film. People are hating it because they want to hate it. And that's the state that Disney and Star Wars is in right now. People despising it because they love it. And it's a weird, fascinating subject to me. I love that about actually analyzing what Star Wars is. That's why I drew Maul. Because I just really like exploring those concepts. It's not something I would ever want to be involved in. If I made something and it went on long enough that it stopped being just a simple, enjoyable thing, it became a cancerous mass that was tied up in modern socio-political structures. Oh, hell no. I would never want that. That would be a nightmare having to deal with that. It's a good thing Lucas got out whenever he did. Although apparently he's still involved in one or two ways. But that's my opinion of Star Wars. That's my opinion of Maul. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the way that Maul came out. I had like Google search results pulled up as far as images go. That's what I was using as reference. Didn't trace it or anything, certainly. Even looking at it, you can probably tell that much. I thought it turned out okay, for the most part. I think the thing I really like about Maul's physical design is his coloration. I really like the red and the black. It's kind of a generic, like if you're in an MMO, I've always mentioned this before, but one of the most common cliche combinations of colors that players always choose is red and black, because it stands out and it looks really nice. So whenever you have Maul wearing this as his outfits, he's a good design, like a good physical design. And he was whenever he came out. And thankfully these days he's a bit more of a complicated design in terms of both his characterization and his physical design. Too bad he had to lose some legs in the process. Too bad for you, Mr. Mole. Oh well, here's to hoping that whenever they bring him back from the dead, yet again, I'm sure Boba Fett will probably have the same treatment, that whenever they bring him back from the dead, they will actually utilize him in a way that is not linked with with American socio-political structures. So, here's to hoping. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed the thing. I hope my comments erupt and people screaming at each other in illogical ways, because I know that it will, because this involves Star Wars. And that is toxic as shit right now. Have a good day.